people come in and say, you're a fighter, keep going, keep pushing, and you go, I got nothing left to give. So once you're at that point, once you resign yourself to the fact that the only thing that you have is faith in this mysterious being that you don't understand, that you can never hope to understand, but once you give yourself that permission to go, okay, you're there, and I'm going to do whatever you want me to do. Whether you want me to live or die, I'm going to be happy with that. And that's where that calmness came from. I still have no fear of dying.
And once you understand, once you have the eternal perspective, and I think a lot of people call me and I say, like, from the human perspective, you would probably do this. But when you have, like, we've had one foot on each side of the cliff, in this world and in the next. When you start seeing things from the eternal perspective, then all your decisions are easier and all your decisions tend to be the right ones.
Ready? Ready to rock and roll? Is that action? All right. Okay.
That's right.
All right.
Absolutely. Go. Go.
Hello, everybody. It's Jason Will with
Go.
So this is a real estate podcast, but we talk about leadership, personal growth, and becoming the best version of yourself. Leadership, check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Growth, best version of yourself.
Go.
So this is a real estate podcast. And welcome everybody to the Impact Agent Podcast. We're on Mobile Bay. How high is the elevation, John? Do you know?
Oh, I know it's 84 steps from the top to the bottom. That's as far as that 6. Oh, it's
a get your heart rate up?
It does, to about 120. Yes, it does. It's a beautiful workout.
This is the prettiest view that I think I've ever had doing a podcast interview, so I'll try to stay attentive to you and not the scenery. But introduce yourself to our audience for us. Tell us, your full name and where you're from.
All right, my name is John Bongiorno. I was born in Melbourne, Australia, which accounts for this ridiculous accent. And I came over to the United States, actually ended up in New York in the summer of 1989. And still trying to get back, but I'll work it out.
You're trying to get back to
Australia.
Or New York.
Just to Australia. I like to get back to Australia every so often. I used to go 2-3 times a year, and a lot happened. Marriage, children, and then it became once every 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So,
what brought you to New York from Australia?
Well, it was actually from Australia. I finished my college education, worked for a few years as a management consultant in Australia, and then a friend of mine who I'd met windsurfing, an English guy, said, do you want to come and start a business with me in England? And I said, yeah. So I quit my job, flew to England and worked with him, set up a very large, very successful floor mat rental business.
Go figure.
Exactly. So I was there for 2 years. We sold it. There a couple of years we sold it. And I took half the money and came and went to New York. I was traveling around the world, but I basically ran out of money in New York. And my father at that time was chairman of lots of companies around the world. So I said, you got any businesses in New York? And he said, yeah, call Lou Goldman. So I called Uncle Louie. He became Uncle Louie. And I started in customer service there. And 16 years later, I was their vice president of a public company. We made bra and panty hangers and then other hangers, but 1.2 billion of them a year. So in 42 different countries. Yeah, I know. So that's what I did for the longest time. And then about 8 or 9, 10 years ago, I said, I got to get out of New York. It's hard work, commuting from Long Island into the city. So I found a very remote part of the world that was very much like Northport, where we lived in New York, very similar, right down to the, on the water and the pier. So we settled in Fairhope. It is funny, and it's a beautiful part of the world. And we loved being here.
Well, I don't know if making bra and panty hangers is necessarily interesting to our listeners, but you...
Probably not, no.
Yeah, but you have an amazing story to tell, and that's why you're here today. Inspirational, motivational, spiritual. So I want you to unpack that for us and tell us what happened. If you could start with maybe just describing
the days or weeks leading up to maybe your diagnosis, and then what was that day like where you actually got the diagnosis? Let's start there.
Okay. Well, prior to my diagnosis, which was around Thanksgiving in 2016, September 19th, my wife went for a routine colonoscopy, which just old people have to do.
Yeah.
And during that colonoscopy, the doctor came out and said he's pretty sure that Michelle, my wife, has stage 4 colon cancer. So that put the whole family, obviously, into a tailspin. That was very, very unexpected. And then, so we started dealing with that, chemotherapy. You know, we went through all of the stages, holding it all together. And then a couple of days before Thanksgiving, what led up to that was her doctor looked at me and said, how are you feeling? And I said, no, I'm good, a little run down. And he said to his nurse, can you run a battery of tests on John just while we're here today? And then she did. And a couple of days later, we got the phone call that said, we're pretty sure that you have leukemia. That was quite the shock, both of us. And it was confirmed. You know, they dig right into your pelvis. They pull out a sample of the bone marrow, and it was confirmed that I had acute myeloid leukemia, and the blast count was really high, and I should get to a hospital immediately. So I ended up going to MD Anderson. But those days, it was very shocking, and it was very, being so far away from family. It was a lot to deal with. We just got 3 children, but Olivia, I think, was 16 or 17 at the time. Johnny was 15 and Soph was 13. So they were young.
How old were you?
I was 49.
49.
Mm-hmm. And Michelle was 52 or 53, yeah.
And you were feeling fine? The
Yep.
doctor just, what did he notice? Maybe a tint in your eye or something?
Yes, he looked at me and he said, yeah, you're not good. And yeah, so yeah, I guess he'd seen a lot of sick people before. So yeah, he wasn't shocked when the diagnosis came back as leukemia. So yeah, so that's what we started dealing with that. So we started to split our time between Fairhope and Houston, at MD Anderson Hospital in Houston.
Wow.
Both of us there at the same time. I think, so Michelle was getting different treatments, obviously, for colon cancer, and then it had metastasized into her lungs, and then she had thoracic surgeries, and that stepped through, and she progressively got worse. And, they cleared all of they thought all of the nodes in her lungs at one point, and then they were going to do the surgery on the other lung, and they did a quick CT scan prior to the operation, and they were all back. So they just said, we can't do it. And that was it. So then it was a steady decline into her death a couple of 2.5 years ago. And then, but at the same time, we were dealing with all sorts of things, and just the beauty of the people around us, the support that we got from Michelle's family, from all of our friends, both in New York, Australia, California, and down here in Alabama, was amazing. We didn't really have to lift a finger. People were rallying. The way that they looked after my children, our children, they split their time. I mean, random reps. I work as a dental rep, right?
Yeah.
So random reps would just turn up at our home and say, we're staying for a week. We'll look after your kids, which left us, alone in, to deal with our own issues in Houston. So we basically had two households.
Wow.
Yeah. And during that time, when Michelle was being treated, she would have good weeks and good months in a row, but I was steadily getting worse. There was a lot of chemotherapy. They were trying to kill off the bone marrow so they could introduce the stem cells. So that was delayed. It was supposed to be 4 weeks, then it was 8 weeks, then 12, then 16 weeks later. So 4 months in the hospital trying to get the blast count down low enough to get a stem cell transplant. The stem cell donor was my twin sister. So I guess that was good planning on my parents' part. Yeah. So, she came over to Houston from Australia and donated her stem cells, and they introduced them to me. And for the first few weeks, it was going well. And then it turned a little bit pear-shaped when my body started to reject those stem cells. It's called graft versus host disease. And it metastasized in my intestines. So at that point, I was unable to eat. I was 61 days without food. And at that point, somewhere along those lines of that time period, I don't remember it that clearly, I was transferred to MD Anderson's acute palliative care ward. And it was then, I was maybe 100 pounds less than my playing weight, as it were, curled up in the fetal position. And at that point, those days, they'd stopped. There was no point feeding me because my intestines were unable to absorb the food and the nutrients. So I guess they were just making me comfortable. I didn't need drugs. I felt no pain, which was an amazing thing. So I never felt any pain. And all I felt at that point was a calmness come over me. That's the best way I can describe it. It was a beautiful, serene calmness. The beauty of that feeling made me, or will enable me to just let go of everything. I, as some people say, well, you just gave it up to God. You couldn't do it anymore. You couldn't do it. There's no fight left in you. You're dying, basically. And I said, yeah, I never died, but I was able to be at such peace with myself that there was all sorts of things going on in and around me. I wasn't on any drugs at all. So they'd stopped giving me drugs. I could hear the doctors talking around me. I could hear my daughter. Olivia was there at the time. And I think it was at that point the doctor said to Olivia, who was then 17, your dad's got about 5 hours to live. Everything has started shutting down, which is normal progression into death. And that's when I heard those most beautiful words from Olivia that I'll never forget. She said, 5 hours. Oh, I've got time to get a smoothie. We bring that up still on occasion. But at that same time, I went into, I don't know, we call it that moment of clarity, because we've talked about it a lot. I've talked about it with my friend Jane Mooney and various people. And I was able to see my past, my present, and my future. So looking back at my life at that point, I was able to see all the wonderful things that the stuff, the big boat, the stuff that we had didn't mean anything. The only thing that I was able to see were those touches. The pushing my kids on a swing, the rope swing on up quiet rivers in Connecticut in the summer, and family and friends.
Would you describe it as a movie playing in your head?
It definitely was.
Yeah.
It was the most amazing thing. And it was, we call it that moment of clarity, when I was able to, there were hundreds of things. And when anybody asks me now, what's the most important thing in life? I always say it's the touches, the interruptions. I call them interruptions. When a kid calls you and you're really, really busy, but you take that time.
Sorry.
No, go.
I'm very curious to know. It sounds like as this movie is playing, of these important touches,
yes,
that it doesn't sound like there was regret or you're not. There's no feeling of I wish I had more time. Was it a feeling of gratitude, like you're just watching the greatest movie you've ever seen?
Yes, it was a feeling of overwhelming peace and calmness and the serenity that people. I didn't care at that point whether I lived or died. It was going to be the same, right? That was so a lot of people are terrified about dying, and I wasn't. In fact, I think probably I was looking forward to it, or it was the inevitable. It was going to happen, and I was ready for it. And there was nothing. I knew what was going on around me. My present, it was the doctors in the room. My daughter was in the room, and then I was able also to get a glimpse going forward. I could see people who were both deceased and alive. I knew that they were deceased and I knew that they were alive together, which was a weird and amazing sort of picture of my future. Like it was, there was no, it was, again, it was welcoming. It was very calm and beautiful. Looking back was the same. My present was that same feeling of calm. And then looking forward to, if I was to die, I knew where I was going, and that people were there that I knew I was going to be fine any which way, whether I lived or died, didn't matter. It was the same beautiful feeling. And we always look at, when I talk to Jane and others about it, we always say, well, that was our first glimpse of heaven.
Wow.
Yeah.
So from the point of diagnosis to going to this acute care ward, were there, elements of fear or, emotional swings? And so you're dealing with...
I was very human. I was afraid for my family, not necessarily for me. I was afraid that, Michelle was very worried about me. Everyone, it was a horrible mess. We had a young family.
The youngest and was 13 at the time?
The youngest was 13, yeah, Sophia. Yeah, there was a tremendous amount of, what's going to happen to them? Who's going to look after them? We'd never even discussed it, really. So there was that going on. So, but personally, both Michelle and Michelle would say during the night, I don't want to die. And I go, I know. I don't think anyone wants to die. But, with us, it looked like it was going to be inevitable, and it was going to be about the same time, too. So diagnosed at the same time and probably going to meet our beautiful maker at the same time, too. But that left a huge empty void, and that was scary. And people around us were scared for us and wanted to do and did everything that they could. It was just to see the people rally. We didn't ask of anything, they just did. There were some of my favorite people in the world, Michelle's friends too from New York. There was a woman by the name of Terry Breen. She just like took it on.
Right.
And there was a woman from Fairhope here who did the same thing down here. She just took it on. This is what's happening. She'd pack the bags, the blankets, everything, drive to and from Houston at the drop of a hat, fly there. They gave up all of their time and just focused on Michelle and me. It was an amazing thing. Michelle's family from New York, mine from Australia, they would just turn up. They arranged weeks at a time. There were times when they would just move into the hotel room with us or right next door, just get another room right next door and make sure that we were, because I couldn't be more than half a mile from the hospital, from the emergency room. And after you have a stem cell transplant, things can go wrong, and they do go wrong. You have a very compromised, you're a newborn baby.
Yeah.
You have no immune system. So any little bug you get can take you down. During those 100 days, I was dealing with graft versus host disease. I don't think anyone has survived that. So hence the first miracle, we call it.
Right.
So just even to survive that was an amazing thing, just for our doctors too, and the looks on their faces when I actually woke up and sat up and started talking to them. And Jane Mooney, and we'll get to her in a little while if you'd like, but she had the same sort of thing, diagnosed here in this house, learned that she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Miss Jane, you've got 3 or 4 months to live. That was an amazing story. So our two lives sort of came together around that. Both Olivia and Jane's Claire went to school Bayside here together, so they graduated together. So that's how the link.
So I don't know if this will make the show, but we'll
right.
see. But I'm fascinated by the smoothie comment, and I know there's got to be somebody who's going to be listening to this going, what did she mean by that? I've got time to get a smoothie.
I was always forever during that period ordering like smoothies, or I'd say, Liv, can you go and get me a smoothie? And she would go and get one. I'd take one sip and that was it, and I'd probably throw it right back at her. So actually, those who know Olivia, that's her sense of humor. It's very much like mine. It's very dry. Okay. So the doctor said, you got 5 hours. She said, well, that's plenty of time to go down and get a smoothie.
I knew that had to be a story behind that.
Yes, sense of humor.
So where was your, mindset, thought process, belief system? What was your background faith-wise at this point?
I had what the good Christians call a mustard seed faith. I sort of went through the motions growing up. My mother and father both were and are still very faithful people, and they lived their life like that. And I think they enforced that on us, the 3 kids. I have a twin sister and I have a younger sister. So we'd go to Mass every Sunday, and we went through all the sacraments all the way through life. And it really didn't mean a whole lot to me or my sisters until this happened. And once you stand on the edge of the cliff, I think that's a quote directly from Jane. Once you stand on the edge of the cliff, you get to understand life, what's important in life, and then how life works. And then you get to and start to think about, why are you still alive? Why are you still alive when your doctors say that there's no chance? So there's something else. And I've seen one doctor, Dr. Wolf, give the advice to Jane. He's the head of gastroenterology at MD Anderson. He said, Jane, I don't know what it is. I don't know why you're still alive, but it's something about this thing that you do. And he put his hands together in that prayer sign. For somebody who has no faith, probably thinks he's God, did it? Yeah. Said it was nothing we did. And when you hear that, you go, wow, there is something bigger out there looking after all of us. Because now I know there is. There's no doubt with what I experienced, what I saw going forward. I have no doubt at all. And it took that to make me realize, now I want to tell everybody, no, he's there. There is this guy, Jesus. There is this guy, God. They're there. Trust me. And now I know how, some clergy and the pastors, and there are all sorts of people that talk about Jesus and God all the time. And they must get frustrated because they look at the congregation sometime and go, oh my gosh, you're not getting it. And I do the same thing, especially with a couple of my kids, you go, really? Really? You saw what happened.
Right.
It was there for you. You were there in the room when you were told I was going to die.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And they didn't have an explanation. It's 20 doctors, infectious diseases doctors going, I don't know, it's nothing we did.
So the 5 hours came and went. And at what point did you sit up and start talking?
I don't know. Maybe it was a couple of days after.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't remember it at all. Olivia does. And it's written down. There's a big folder here.
Okay.
Because we were interviewed afterwards, both Jane and I, and we got input from my sisters and Michelle's family and to try and fill in the gaps, because it's a whirlwind. And when you're pretty much out of it for, like I was, for a period of months, it's hard to work out I had no idea where I was. I didn't know who the president was. There was a lot of days like that until, leading up to it, as they were trying to purge me of my bone marrow.
So when you wake up and start talking and they start running tests, are there tissues and organs that are now healthy that weren't, a few days prior?
Yes.
Essentially?
Yeah. I really didn't go into it in detail with my then Dr. Oran, who was my stem cell doctor. She would come and visit me afterwards, and it's a teaching hospital, right? So she would have somebody with her, a new doctor, and she would come in, and I was getting photophoresis or some other treatment, and she would come in and say, well, this is Mr. Bongiorno. Mr. Bongiorno was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia and had graft versus host disease of the intestines, and now he has GVHD of the skin. And the young doctor would always say, he must have been misdiagnosed, because as soon as you say GVHD of the intestines, it's a death sentence, right? You can't eat. So your body can't absorb nutrients. And I remember Dr. Aran she'd done it a couple of times, to this young doctor and say, John's special. We don't know what it is, but I will tell you later. And no, he wasn't misdiagnosed. I diagnosed him. And then we had our GVHD specialists work with John right through. So yeah, there was no misdiagnosis. And we get that a lot with Jane. She had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It's she lit up like the CT scan with contrast, lit up like Hamburg on Christmas Eve. It was in her neck, clavicle, brain, pancreas, obviously, lymph nodes, everywhere. And then 4 months later, it was gone, and everybody would say, yeah, she must have been misdiagnosed. Well, not really. It was the head of the hospital. That's what he specializes in. This is what he's been doing for 35 years. He's seen 1 million patients. And no, he didn't misdiagnose that one either. So, so there's a lot of doctors. I have a brother-in-law who's a doctor, said, until he started seeing him, we sent him he had access to all of the files too, and was able to see everything. And he'd go, Paul would say, dude, I got no idea. So it was, yep, you should be dead.
It seems like there's some kind of an intellectual struggle here between the medical field,
Yep.
between science and religion or faith.
Yep.
Because they're you've said it a couple times. I can't describe it. I'll tell you later. That thing you do. I mean, they don't even want to say it
Nope.
out loud.
No, they don't. They're coming around, though.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when Jane will walk back in there and I'll go into my doctor. Dr. Iran is Turkish. I presume I don't want to presume anything. We haven't really discussed it, but she will say, yeah, there's something about your God. And I go, hey, Dr. Iran, he's your God too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I guess, and this is a whole nother podcast episode about, there's a fine line there about people trying to pray things away that maybe they should be doing that or they shouldn't. I don't know. That science does have a role.
Absolutely it does. And these doctors are instruments. Okay, they're gifted and talented. Some of them very gifted and talented, and they've worked hard, but they have this innate ability, which we know comes from God. He puts us on this earth, and if you follow the path that you're supposed to follow, that light, you will do good. And these doctors have amazing ability, amazing brains, and amazing work ethic too, and to deal with death every day and to still smile and come to work and still want to do better than the best that they've already done. Yeah. So that's where they become, their total focus is on science. But even with my brother-in-law, who's a doctor in Melbourne, Australia, he had a lot of questions on the non-scientific side.
Right.
So, and we talk about that a lot now. So he's slowly coming around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's go down that road for a sec. So you come through this, you're starting to feeling better every day. I mean, when you sat up and started talking, did you go, oh my gosh, this is a miracle? Or did you start hearing people say, there's something special about John, and you started reflecting and questioning, or did you have this spiritual moment where you woke up and go, this is this total God thing?
Yeah, I did have that.
Okay.
I had that. It was a total God thing. There was no other explanation. And I think the once you give up, I think Christians will say that if you've got problems and burdens, you leave them at the foot of the cross. You just give it up, right? Don't worry about it anymore because you can't fix it. Okay? And people say, and once you leave it at the foot of the cross, don't go back and pick it up. Just leave it there and move on. Because there are things that you can't deal with, you can't explain away, and you can't carry with you if you hope to survive. It's a burden. And if you just take that burden off yourself, because there's no fight left in you, you're weak. You want to fight and you want to live, but you can't. It's not up to you at that point. It really isn't up to you, And to have people come in and say, you're a fighter, keep going, keep pushing. And I got nothing left to give. So once you're at that point, once you resign yourself to the fact that the only thing that you have is faith in this mysterious being that you don't understand, that you could never hope to understand. But once you give yourself that permission to go, okay, you're there. And I'm going to do whatever you want me to do. Whether you want me to live or die, I'm going to be happy with that. And that's where that calmness came from. I still have no fear of dying. None at all.
What weights or burdens were you carrying?
I've got to get better to help my kids. I need to earn money to pay the mortgage. I can't go on I can't leave them. There's that family tie.
And even pre-diagnosis, were you dealing with things like, I got to have money for retirement, just the normal pressures and focuses that we all have that are, that
all very important.
Yeah.
And all, you must focus on your future and invest carefully and wisely. It's hard.
So how have your priorities shifted now? I mean, are those things still priorities?
Not so much anymore.
Right.
No, my priorities are to help as many people to tell my story And I get the beautiful opportunity to get to speak to lots of different people every week because I work with dentists all over Alabama and the Florida Panhandle. And I will tell my story whether they want to hear it or not.
Right.
And some of them want to hear it, and some of them invite me to come and talk to their practices. They'll shut down for a couple of hours and they'll say, come and talk to us and tell us your story. We've got non-believers, believers, we've got everything here. And I go, oh, that's great. And I will. I'll tell my story. I'm not into converting everybody. I just want to tell them, anyone. You live, everyone, be you. But I'm telling you, this is the easier way, and then your focus pulls away from stuff. You don't need stuff.
Yeah.
You look at that with you're younger than me, a lot younger, but when you're looking at elderly parents and they have piles of stuff, none of that, your children don't want it. There's no need for you to have kept it for 50 years, my second grade report card.
Right.
There's sweaters that great-great-grandmother, knitted in 1838, it's just going to get thrown away.
Right.
So now I try and live like that and instill that in my 3 children and anyone who'll listen to me. It's not about the stuff. It's about the touches. It's about your family and friends. Rest doesn't matter. And I'm more like that because I've got a use by date. Hopefully I'll live for 30 years. Likely that I won't, and that's okay too. But I want everyone to around me, my friends and family, to know that it's not about stuff. It's about the beauty that's around us, and you can find it every day. If you get too caught up in working 80 hours a week and squirreling money away, and none of it matters. I've seen people do that. 80 years old, and he's got a $3 million house and $2 million in the bank. It goes to the kids or the grandkids, and they don't really need it because if you've done the right thing, you've already instilled in them a work ethic and an understanding that whatever you do, you must help people. And if that becomes your focus with your job, it's an awesome job. You give people what they want. Well, it's a huge investment to buy a home, and to guide them into getting the right home is a beautiful thing, one that's going to appreciate and value, but also give them the joy and the freedom that they want.
Do you have any issues keeping this focus? I mean, do you ever find yourself getting caught back up into the rat race or just the stuff or the superficial things in life? Do you have to do things to train yourself to focus on the beauty of life and the important things?
Not as much anymore. No. And I'll go back to that quote after standing on the edge of the cliff. It really is easy to remember every morning how beautiful it is to open your eyes, wake up and get moving again. And some mornings you feel lousy and you still just go through the motions. You put one foot in front of the other, and it's an easy thing to do. I mean, but that you appreciate more. You have I used to hear it, you probably did growing up, stop and smell the roses. And it happens, children grow up so quickly, enjoy the moment, and you don't. And I never did. I was just powering through, saving money and doing stuff that maybe wasn't as important as what I should have been doing. As I said, when I was able to look back, it was those times. It wasn't about work and how much of this we sold. And it was about helping people. That touch, those interruptions. And I try and live like that now. If anybody asks me, or Jane's the same way, you get people diagnosed all the time with stage 4 PanCan, and they'll find Jane because she's got a blog herself, and they call her Wonder Woman at MD Anderson. If I go to MD Anderson with Jane, I have to get the COVID test. They go, yeah, Miss Jane, you're good. Really? We've just been in the car 8 hours together. Anyway.
Well, I'm sure you can probably still relate to people, that struggle with this.
Yes.
I mean, have you shared your story with somebody that hasn't had their cliff moment?
Right.
That a spark goes off and they go, you're right. I need to change my focus. Because I think it's incredibly hard.
It is incredibly hard.
Because my focus will be changed. Then I'll maybe drive back to Birmingham. I'll start thinking of all these thoughts. My mind will be racing, and then Monday morning I'll get sucked right back into my grind.
Yes,
because I'm I'm an empire builder. I'm
right.
looking to build something great, and it really consumes me. So But in the back of my mind, I know it's not the most important thing. And I'm going to regret all this time that I spent doing this in some respect.
Building your empire, yes. I don't know whether regret will be what you'll feel. Maybe a little sadness, and that'll be fleeting, because once you make that realization, whether you're 50, 60, or 70, you can make that change then. So you can then start to go, I've done that, I've built that, and I did an awesome job, and I employed 1 million people doing it and supported families left and right and built that. And that's a good thing. You need to do that. At my stage in life, I go, maybe I've got enough. I'm just happy here with this. I'm happy watching my 3 children try and get an education. And I don't really care. I don't put any pressure on them. With my son, John, it could take him 9 years to get a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
And I go, really? It doesn't matter.
Right.
It really doesn't. So
is there a prescription? I mean, it's obvious that prayer needs to be a discipline, a daily discipline.
it absolutely does.
Is there anything else that you would prescribe to help people, just to, even if it was a small portion of the day, to stop to recognize the beauty around them?
Yep. And you should do that. People can call it meditation or whatever, or you can just talk. Hey, God, I'm here. I'm listening. Have you got anything for me? And if you take your reality away, even for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds in prayer, or just speaking out loud to this being, you feel the pressure of the moment, the day, the week just disappear. And I do it by going to Mass. Most mornings I'll be at Mass at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but it really sets the tone for the day. I liken it to when you flick a pebble into a still water on a lake and you get those ripples. Those ripples are from that peace that I get at Mass in the morning, carry me through the day. You don't get angry. People drive badly. And then I look at, and you want to, I used to be such a bad, like, I can't believe you did that. You cut me. Now I go, I've done that. I've done that.
Right.
So, yeah. So your priorities and your perspective changes. And if you just grow to it, expect people do dumb things, then it doesn't worry you anymore. So I guess it's just taking that pressure off, and then you're able to fulfill your obligations better during the day. You can do more if you don't carry the stress.
You're devout Catholic. Is that how you describe yourself these
I would
days?
now. And that's probably largely to do with my father persisting all of those years ago. You've got to do, and my mother, you've got to do this, and your first communion, and all of the sacraments all the way through, right, to meeting Jane, who goes to Mass every day, and she will just, and that inspiration. I think we now inspire each other. There are some mornings where you feel like, I don't really want to get up at 6 o'clock and go to Mass, but one of us will text and we'll say, well, let's meet at church at 7, and we just do it.
Well, before we get into how you and Jane connected, I think what I'm hearing you say, even though you're devout Catholic, which is, when people think of Catholicism, I think they think very litigious. There's very rules.
There's a lot of rules.
It's very strict.
Yes.
But I've heard you say a couple times, like, this being.
I don't care where you get your Jesus or your God.
Yeah.
It can be at the Catholic Church. It can be at Highlands. It can be anywhere. Doesn't matter. As long it's the same. Catholicism is a very different thing. And there are a lot of rules, and the rules help you live. If you follow those rules, like I never did, but now I do, life is easier.
Right.
And there's a reason for it. And now I've got Dr. Mooney here, who's your doctorate is in theology, right? In sacred literature. Okay, so she's very well versed in it and able to explain to me why you don't do this. Basically there are 10 rules, and we all have them. Right? Yeah. And if you follow those 10 rules, it's really simple.
You're going to have a pretty good life.
You are, but if people can't get 6 or 5, and some people can't get 4,
right,
or 3, so it makes you struggle, and then you have the weight of those missteps, and they are missteps. Whether it's Catholicism or you're a Baptist or anyone, I don't care. I love going to different churches, they're all basically I can't say the same, but they all have the same goal in mind.
Yeah.
And it's a calmness in living, and it's an understanding that there's a greater being, and that we're here for a reason.
Yeah, because it's almost like an excuse, or people are looking for a reason to discredit. Catholicism, too many rules.
Right.
Baptists, too many hypocrites.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have to separate with the Catholic Church, for example, we get a very bad rap because of the priests.
Yeah.
And my father, and it's true, and there's no denying it. And there are bad men involved. And my father said back in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up, don't ever forget your church. Don't associate it with men, because the men will screw it up every time.
Yeah.
He said, but it's the basics, the foundation of the church. He said, that's what matters. The men are going to be a problem always.
Yeah.
They're sinners, right?
Yeah.
They can't get it right. They've made some missteps along the way and they're paying for it, and they should damn well pay for it. But that doesn't make me want to be not a Catholic, because if you follow the rules, and there's a little book that's written, there's an Old Testament and a New Testament. If you follow those rules, listen to those stories and take that as your guidance, it's
a personal thing.
It's a very personal thing.
It's like about you, and we're just trying to look at others and judge their lifestyle. If they are sacred men,
right?
They're still men,
right?
So if they screw up, then the whole thing's screwed up, and I don't need to bother with it.
Yeah, and that's a mistake, and I made that mistake. And I'm old. I'm 55 yesterday, and it took me this long to work out that, wow, if I'd have just followed the damn rules.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And, because it's easy to find excuses. Yeah. Oh, Catholics, they're full of, this is going on, and there are a lot of issues with that, and bad priests. But if you go past that and you look at the holiness of even at the close of every Mass, it's a beautiful thing, that little miracle that we believe in. That bread and water is the body and blood of Jesus Christ. So, probably 80% of Catholics don't even know that that's a little miracle that's performed every day, right? So, and once you get that, it becomes so much more powerful.
Right. One more question before we get to Jane. This is fascinating stuff. But so the way you guys live now, your lifestyle, I know in terms of movies you watch, things you listen to, are you very guarded about what you let in terms of garbage in, garbage out?
Absolutely, yes. And I can annoy Jane very quickly by wanting to watch something and she is very disciplined at it. And now I'm trying to be the same way. Again, I keep learning. And she goes, there's no need for any of that. And once you figure it out, you go, oh my God, there isn't. And you can watch, there's so much that you can watch that's or listen to that's much better than the nonsense that's going on.
There's a lot of nonsense going on.
Yeah, I don't have any social media anymore. It's all gone.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got rid of it. I was great at Insta and Snapchat and stuff like that, like trying to be hip for the kids. I got rid of it all. In fact, 2 of my kids have followed that example.
Wow,
yes.
That's amazing.
Yep. I didn't say anything. It just took up so much time. And I think it was Olivia, the first one, said, oh my God, I spend so many hours looking at nonsense. So, and that's, you get away from what's important, looking at what's around us and the beauty. You can always find beauty. You can always find horror too, but if you look for the beauty, that will give you the serenity and the calmness, and the rest will look after itself. We're not here to fix the problems of the world.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to make to the audience. Like, you're going around telling your story, at some point somebody's going to have their cliff moment. Right. It's not for you to try to force them to the edge or force your belief system on them. At some point it's going to happen, and whether it's on their deathbed or several decades before, they're going to reach this point. We all do.
Right.
If that hurricane comes up the bay, all the non-believers on the street are going to hit their knees, right? I mean, it's just the way it all goes. That's why we always ask for help when we need it.
Right. And you can't force the issue. You're absolutely right. And I don't want to, but I would love everybody to just reflect for a few minutes a day on how wonderful their lives are, and find the beauty in it, not the stress, not the pain, just focus on the things that are good, and you find them in everything that you do. And you're always helping people that way too.
This seems like a simple explanation of, if you stop trying to explain it and just start appreciating the beauty of it, you're going to take a lot of pressure off yourself, you know?
That's true.
Because people are just trying to explain every little who made this and who did that and where did he come from. And it's just, you know, as you said, like right in the very beginning, you're not meant to understand it.
Right. No.
You shouldn't try. If you spend all your time trying to understand it, you're going to miss out on all the beauty, right?
You will.
All right, so let's get to Miss Jane finally.
Okay. Yes.
So you would think it's the odds of you and Michelle getting diagnosed with cancer, with you surviving, and then now you connecting with Jane, who is a stage 4 survivor. Like, what are the odds of all this happening?
I don't know. I think Jane is best at answering that question. Right?
Well, chance of me surviving was 1%. Do I have to do the math? The math of us connecting is, I think we could have won the lottery easier than that. But God always had a plan. He had a plan to take care of my daughter and for his children. And he knew that by us carrying our personal crosses, that this was what he wanted us to do. I mean, this was the job that, I guess, from the eternal perspective, that's my job. And that's his job, and it's everybody's job, is to create the ability for others to see the kingdom on earth, and for us to get to heaven and to carry those who have been put in our care, like my daughter Claire and his 3 children. And if this is what God asked me to do, even though it was most difficult, you can carry it. In a sense, it's almost easier, like John has been saying, it's almost easier because I didn't have an option. There was no exercise I could do. There was no medicine really that I could take. When they give you 3 to 6 months and a 1% chance of making it.
It's very final.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so once you know that it is truly in God's hands, not like your empire building that you were saying, you know, that's you think it's in your hands, but God is using your empire building to bring others to God.
Right.
And if that's what God wants you to do, your empire will be there. If it's not what he wants you to do, it won't.
Even if you don't realize it.
Right.
And so then it takes the weight of your day-to-day living is off your shoulders. You know, if my daughter was supposed to go to nursing school in Boston, it would have happened. If God wants her to go to nursing school here closer to home, he will create all, if we are open and attentive to every little sign that he has. And like he says in the Bible, every hair on our head is accounted for. So if you either believe God is all-powerful, omniscient, or he's not. Either God can cure me, you know, even though the doctors say no. Either you believe he's omniscient or he's not. And I chose to believe that he was all-powerful. It was to my benefit to believe that.
Right.
You know.
Jane came into this with a strong faith, whereas I came in with little faith. So you lived your life as a very faithful person, right?
Yes, it was part of my culture also, being half Latin and half Irish. You know, Catholicism was just your day-to-day. Mm-hmm. You know, everything you do was imbued, almost like, you know, people who are called culturally Jewish. You know, I was culturally Catholic and my faith was Catholic. So it was easy to navigate, to understand that this was a cross that I was asked to bear. That's just something that you just practice all the time as a Catholic. You know, you stub your toe. Oh, that's a cross you have to bear. You know, as a little kid, that's how they kind of train you to the big stubs on your big toe.
We never ever thought, why me? It was easier and more comfortable to say, thank God it was me and not someone else that I knew or my child or whatever. So, you know, if you're sick, you're sick. You know, there's nothing you can do about it, and you can't opine the situation. Why me? It doesn't. And never even crossed our minds.
And Dr. Wolf said that the people who are angry,
they
usually don't survive.
Yeah.
And so when I was sitting there calmly, not that
after
I didn't
he died, after he said yes,
and you know I do shed tears. I mean, it was the saddest thing, but I was calm about it. That doesn't mean my stomach right now, just thinking about it, is in the butterflies that I'm feeling right now, and I'm sweating cold while I'm just sitting here chatting with you. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean I'm not human.
Right.
You know, even Jesus asked that cup be taken away. And I did. I asked. And I said, if it's not, then thy will be done. And I had to repeat that to myself every day. Thy will be done.
So the day you met, let's take me there.
Yes, take me there, Jane.
Well, my daughter Claire and John's daughter Olivia were classmates at Bayside at the local school. Yes. And so Olivia called Claire and said, I'd like to know, could you have your mom talk to my mom about, because I was on a very strict vegetarian diet. I was doing everything I could to maintain my body healthy because I knew it had to fight. It was in the fight of its life.
Yeah.
And so I said, sure. And so I called her up. I said, Michelle, this is Jane, Claire's mom. And I said, I can come. She was in New York and she was coming back. And I said, I'll meet you at your house. And that's when she called and said, maybe you don't need to come because they haven't given me any hope. And I said, well, I'll still come. And that's when I noticed his younger daughter, Sophia, was sitting there on a school day without going to school. And since I'm a tutor, I love to teach. So anytime I see someone needing to learn, I always say, here. So I came and said, I will pick you up tomorrow morning and I will teach you through the virtual school, and so that she wouldn't fall behind. That was the same decision I made with my daughter. I said, it was my personal battle at MD Anderson. I want you to go to college because if things go, like you say, pear-shaped, I need her to have a structured life to keep her in balance. Yeah. And so I said, I will do that for Sophia. And so through the months after Michelle passed away and through the months of me tutoring his daughter, I noticed that John would give me comfort. It's not that many people that you meet day to day that have stood on that cliff of looking out at eternity. And whereas John didn't have fear of that next step, I did. I did not have that peace. I had peace with the illness, but I wasn't ready to... God did not give me that grace of a peaceful death. That information I didn't have. And so being able to know that I can hold on to someone's hand in case I did have to take that step. I knew that it's too much to ask my daughter to do that. My parents are deceased. There's not a lot of people who can say, Jane, don't worry, I'm here. I know what you're going through. And I will hold your hand as you go from this side to the other side. And I think that was one of the reasons why you're sitting here at my house today.
Yeah.
Well, she lets you hang around.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Yes.
So how far into your recovery were you, as Jane is now somewhat going downward? Like you had already come through this and she's going down, right?
Jane?
Yes.
No, Jane, at that point, you were still having chemo, right?
I had actually finished.
That's where we met, basically. I know she came to my house, but I don't remember it when Michelle was alive. I don't remember.
No, I had just finished, because I was in remission for a year. So we met during that time.
During remission, okay.
During remission. And so what God gave me was the gift of looking healthy. Even though I took one of the most horrific chemotherapy treatments that there is for pancreatic cancer, I still look just like I look now.
She didn't lose her hair. It was amazing.
And so I knew that God wanted me to be a sign of hope for people, so that they could look at me and go, okay, this is doable. And that's what I do for people. And so during that time is when, and John was quite ill.
Yeah.
Even though he was on this side, he was still quite ill. And so I helped him get back on track, health-wise, eating, feeding him every 2 to 3 hours.
Oh yeah, I got really sick at one point. Yeah, Jane would feed me rice and beans.
Rice and frijolitos y arroz.
Yes, every 3 hours. Yes.
And so then I was re-diagnosed. The cancer came back, and that's when it was so important to John to be there by my side and go, Jane, that's all right, let's do it. And that's when I had another round of chemotherapy. I was privileged. I'm one of the few people that are privileged to get robotic surgery, so I have just a couple of little scars, and then another round of chemotherapy. And so you need someone to be strong emotionally there for you, because the physical part, we can handle. The emotional parts, though.
Yeah, and with pancreatic cancer, there is, they say it's inoperable, and then with this robotic surgery and that young surgeon who said, I can do this, he actually wrote after the surgery curative, even I think your doctor even questioned.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He said, no, that it's gone. There's nothing. There's nothing in her blood. There's nothing in her body. Even the dead tumor he removed, which was, you call it a series of little miracles every time you started at MD Anderson. And so we draw great strength from each other. I actually take more than I give. But yeah, because she's amazing as an inspiration to a lot of people. She really is. And the way she's talking as if you're not here, but she's very calm and focused and faithful, and everything's about God.
It's interesting. You said that you were very calm, but that you didn't have peace about dying.
Leaving my daughter behind.
Leaving your daughter behind, and you were able to portray this calmness as a sign of hope. Even like not just your physical health up from the exterior point, but not getting angry and not going through these emotional outbursts or anything like that, and woe is me type stuff.
Yes, I think the prayers. I mean, the one about praying without ceasing,
Yeah.
There were days that I would pray the Rosary, which is a series of, 50 Hail Marys and Our Fathers, one after another. And there were days that it would be just back to back for hours on end. In other words, every time I would feel fear, I would pray. And you're feeling fear a lot. Mm-hmm. So that means you're praying a lot. And people would see me when it's almost like being on a surfboard where the big wave is crushing you down. And the only thing you have to do is keep your body just nice and calm and just wait till you pop back up.
Yeah.
And so it was those waves of tremendous emotion plus the chemotherapy, and the prayer was what kept me just floating on that turbulent sea. And when people would peek in on me, the people, my caretakers, they thought, one Maritza even said, Jane, I thought you were talking to God, because she must, I don't know what, I was just praying. I was just praying like my life depended on it.
It did.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's such an amazing story.
It is. And Jane's army of people around her was also an amazing thing. I don't think you had to lift a finger for a year. Well, and people came from Guatemala and all over.
Yeah,
right?
from all over, yes.
Yeah.
I had people praying for me. I had a map where people had gone to, on vacation, and there were even people who were not Catholic, and who were even people who, like Zach, who doesn't believe in anything, an unbeliever. They would go and light a candle. I said, but I need proof. Mm-hmm. So they would take a selfie in all the churches. I have
around
churches
mm-hmm.
on every continent in the world.
When people say, oh, our thoughts and prayers are with you, people go, well, that's not going to feed you and that's not going to look after the kids. Thoughts and prayers, when you're sick as you are, is worth more than anything else. That knowing that people are actually thinking about you and talking to God for you, is it an intercession? I don't know. It takes another burden off your mind. And it really is.
And you can feel it physically. Mm-hmm. I knew the day that people stopped praying for me. I mean, that intentionally. I still have lots of people that pray. I always say, please don't quit praying for me. Even though the doctor says I'm fine, please don't. But the being carried on the wings of prayer, we read these metaphors and we think that, it's just a pretty image.
It's just silly, yeah. It's not real. There's no science.
That I did feel.
Yeah.
I did feel being enveloped by, and so when I would walk, if you could say that gravity wasn't as oppressive, maybe there was some physicality that I could say was tied into the amount of prayers that were uplifting me. And we use these words, prayers
lift them up in
lift
prayer.
You.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I did feel that now. I did feel that physically.
And when somebody asks you to pray for them, you actually stop and you do it. Yeah. And you can say it out loud or in your mind or head, but you do it. That helps both of you at the same time.
How do you both reconcile? I mean, you mentioned non-believers. Do you just feel at some point it's going to happen? It's just like their cliff moment. At some point they're going to have this realization. Maybe you hope it's sooner than later. but how do you deal with that? I mean, it's somebody you really care about that's a non-believer.
I have lots of them. And so how I explain, we are called to be witnesses. And witnesses is more our actions. They say actions speak louder than words. Mm-hmm. So there's one particular unbeliever whom I'm helping right now a lot. And he wants to know why, now that I'm, let's say, hopefully cured, I should be just enjoying life. I don't need to be, working day to day, helping someone that much, doing dishes, cleaning, taking care of his babies and things like that. He asked me, and I said, one, it's my faith, because we are asked to serve others. And I said, and I'm returning that which was done to me through faith. And so he's seeing faith in action. Because if he asked me, I said, I'm not doing it for, love of family if you want to, or friendship, or however you want to say it. But the reason why I'm doing it is because God has asked me to do this for your 2 little boys. And so he doesn't answer. And actually, when they don't answer, it's because their room, it's in their brain going around. And so I think that's how we bring people along with us.
To witness by action, not words.
By serving.
By serving.
By serving.
By serving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not asking anything in return. Because we know what's coming in return. I've seen.
And my mother used to always say, you cannot outdo God in generosity.
Right, that's good.
Yes, if you think about it. God will, our talents, if we use it for the kingdom of God, why? Yeah. God is a God of order and logic. Why would he not bless you? If what you are doing is for the kingdom of God. That's the caveat. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't even know you're doing it.
Right.
Which is a good thing too.
Yes, you're here today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see where God is using you and because I'm not this comfortable like he is speaking.
Oh, I love an audience. Yes. Yeah, no, I know you don't. You're very shy. Jane is very inspiring, and because she is so humble, and she really is a humble person, take some of that humility and try and put it on myself is difficult, but I try it.
God gave you the gift of speaking to people in public.
Yeah.
I do better one-on-one. That's why I tutor kids one-on-one.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. That's how I do my work.
Yeah.
One person at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just personally, it's just so easy. I'm so easily distracted. Mm-hmm. And so I'll go through these phases where I'm really focused on things like gratitude. Then I'll go through an even longer period where it's just very selfish. It's just interesting to hear.
Oh my goodness, you're human.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I look up to people that have this tremendous faith, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I wish I could have that discipline, or just, like when I read Bob Goff, and now I'm reading Maria Goff's book, and it's just like, oh my gosh, these people are so grounded and so centered, and at the same time still so successful. So I'm just keep getting there. I just want to my plan is just to surround myself with people, and hopefully it'll rub off.
It definitely will rub off. It will.
Once you have the eternal perspective, and I think a lot of people call me, and I say, like, from the human perspective, you would probably do this. But when you have, like, we've had one foot on each side of, the cliff, in this world and in the next. When you start seeing things from that 30,000 feet up, or from the eternal perspective, then all your decisions are easier, and all your decisions tend to be the right ones. And what I tell my daughter or anyone is, when you're walking in God's light, when you're walking in the light, and God always said, the lamp at your feet. And if you put a lamp above your head, how far can you see? Like those big fishing lamps that you can see from bank to bank. But what did God say? He said, the lamp at your feet. So how far can you see? Just right there, just the next step.
Yeah.
And so just keep the next step from the eternal perspective, and everything else will be given unto thee.
Wow.
Right? Then it makes it easy to live.
It's powerful.
Makes it easy to live.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate both of you sharing your stories. I think that's a pretty powerful note to end on. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to say to the world?
I did ask Miss Jane to marry me.
When?
Well, it was a while. How long ago? She rushed back with an answer. It took 48 hours. Yeah, really?
Mañana.
And now I keep reminding her, remember you said yes? And she always says, yeah, mañana.
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 Like a good Latin. Mañana.
Yeah, yes, tomorrow.
In God's time.
Yes.
When everyone has been taken care of.
We like to have no chaos at all. None. So heading towards minimalizing everything, right? Including distractions. Taking the distractions away. And if you do that, you can do a lot more. And that's it. So
yeah.
It'll happen in time.
A lot of wisdom in this interview. A lot. Well, I guess there's no way people can follow you if neither of you are on social media. So,
You're on Do you have Facebook still?
I have to do a Facebook
For your
presence because people who have pancreatic cancer, that's how they find me.
Okay. So is it okay to tell people how to find you?
Yes.
Great.
On Facebook.
Yeah.
And if you Google Jane Mooney and MD Anderson, I wrote a couple of articles to explain what happened to me, a little more of the day-to-day details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
This has been amazing. I cannot wait this is going to be a gift to many people. So
Good.
thank you for taking the time.
Wow, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Impact Agent Podcast. If you like the show and got something out of it, please like the Impact Agent Podcast on Facebook and rate and review the show on iTunes or anywhere you listen to podcasts. This really helps us grow the show and helps other agents find it. Please share it with your friends and coworkers as well. Want us to deliver the show to you via email every week? Then email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com and we'll send you the show every week. Please let us know what you think about the show, what you like, what you don't, or possibly make a suggestion about a topic you want to hear. Email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com or leave us a message on Facebook at Impact Agent Podcast. Until next week, everybody be productive, safe, and happy, and always keep learning. This podcast is produced by Johnny Gwynn at Deep Fried Studios in Mobile, Alabama, and is paid for and powered by ImpactAgentUniversity.com.